to be threatened with the fact that someone was going to take that away from me was the only reason why I chose to come out publicly.
Daniel Kowalski, welcome to Shaped. I'm very excited about this because you are the first non-football athlete or retired athlete that we've had on the show. And I suppose from my own selfishness, I'm really intrigued about the journey of, elite sport in another domain, one that I assume, as much as you're part of a team in some circumstances, it's a very, you have to be motivated and strong and disciplined in your own right to get to where you got to. But also there's just so much more depth to your story. So I'm really looking forward to having a wonderful conversation around your journey. But let's start at the very start, because I did read that you were born in Singapore.
Yes. Probably one of the most least likely places to start a career. But yeah, Dad was in, first of all, absolutely honoured to be here, and I'm really excited to be a part of this. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Dad was a drilling engineer working in Southeast Asia. So at that point in time, that's where Mum had me. But within 6 months, we were out of there and off to Malaysia after that, and then Indonesia. So the first 5 or 6 years I was in Southeast Asia living an expat's life, I guess you could say, before moving here to Adelaide when I was 5.5.
And brothers, sisters?
Older sister.
Older sister.
So yeah, 2.5 years older. So those first formative years, it was just her and I, and in a crazy expat world that really just were equivalent to army brats, really just following Dad wherever he went.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a number of conversations with friends or family or people that I've met along the journey that do have kids or have lived overseas for a period of time, and I suppose speaking to the kids, often I go, there is something in this worldly experience that helps educate them. Would you agree with that based on your own experience? Did it put you out of your comfort zone from the very beginning? Obviously, you probably didn't know any different at the time. But when you reflect on it, do you go, yeah, maybe it was beneficial?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was it just opens your eyes. When you're living in a place like Jakarta, which has, back then, I don't know, but it was a hell of a lot more people than in Adelaide. You get a broader perspective and appreciation of those finer little things that you probably would take for granted. So the crazy hustle and bustle of out in the streets, we're in the security of a compound where all the expats are living, and then you go outside those gates and you see the craziness of the world. You also see the poverty, and I can remember that vividly as a 4 or 5-year-old.
Yeah, right.
So when you move to a safe place like Adelaide, your perspective and having that sort of global experience definitely has put me probably in a advantaged position compared to others.
Yeah, I suppose it dials up that appreciation for what you do have, which I know, you're forever, as a dad myself, you're forever trying to educate your kids that what we have is we're very fortunate for. But when you actually go out there and see what the opposite can look like, I'm sure that it puts you in position even at the ripe old age of 5 years old. Let's talk about the love of swimming. At what stage of your life as a kid did you establish, one, that you were really bloody good at it, and two, you had a love for it?
Yeah, well, I think it gets back to moving to Australia, and my dad could see very early on that, listen, sport is a foundation in this country, and it was a good way for my sister and I to meet people. I tried everything, but swimming was always sort of that go back to, not because I was good at it, but that's where my circle of friends were.
Yeah.
If anything, I loved surf lifesaving more than I loved swimming. But I couldn't I grew up in the Michael Jordan era, and so I love basketball, but if you see swimmers on land, there's very few that are comfortable on land. Cricket bored the hell out of me. Aussie rules, I could never kick it to a teammate, or I'd kick it out on the full. And my school was very focused on cricket in summer, Aussie rules in winters. So swimming was what I just went back to because I was decent, but I wasn't good.
Yeah.
In Adelaide, with all due respect, I was good, but nationally I wasn't making finals. I was a long way behind.
Yeah. So that transition, as you're growing up, you are becoming even more entrenched in the sport of swimming. How do you go from being good in Adelaide to then becoming someone who is going to represent Australia at the next Olympics?
One of the things, like on reflection, that I really noticed was that I loved it.
Yeah.
So whilst I wasn't the best in my squad, I had a deep love for the sport, acutely aware of the history and tradition, desperately wanted to be a part of that tradition. And so it was the concentration on the little things, like technically, that was enabled me to go from average to being in consideration to making the Australian team.
When you speak about those technical things, what was one technical change that you made in the early stages that had one of the greatest impacts in your performance?
So I had a number of coaches in my time. Dennis Cottrell was probably the one who had the biggest impact on me. And I remember still vividly, he said, it's the movement of my little finger. And the movement of my little finger enabled me to catch the water better, which enabled me to take nearly 15 seconds off
Wow.
my best time.
Across what distance?
1,500.
Oh, 1,500,
Yeah. I wish it was 200.
I was going to say, but even over
But that's a
1,500.
second 100. So, so that was the difference between making the Australian team and not.
Yeah. You spoke about the love you had for the tradition of Australian swimming and the rich history that we have as a country. Was it etching yourself in history around winning a gold or any medal that was a driver or a key driver for you? Or what's the tradition that you speak of?
John Sieben 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles was my sort of first glimpse in terms of, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. A young kid going out there and doing that, not understanding what the Olympics really was in the sense of how do you get there, what was the process. As a 9-year-old, you don't really understand that. And then so through that, looking through all the the books, you'd go to the library at school and you'd take out the book about the Olympics, and I'd read about your Andrew Boyd Charltons, and then you'd then enamored with the story of Dawn Fraser and then Murray Rose. So all these names that for me are absolute icons and legends. And then watching that evolve from 1984, 88, and then 1992, I tried out for the team. They only take 2 people, and I got third behind Kieran Perkins and Glenn Houseman at those trials. And I was like, wow, I'm very close to being a part of that. I didn't feel as though I belonged there, but I still wanted to be a part of it because of all of those that had come before me.
Yeah, well, that's really special. And I should disclose, because you spoke about the pinky being a key change from a technical point of view. Well, I don't think I would ever have been a good swimmer because of my pinky, but I have a real appreciation for just how hard swimming is. I broke my foot before I was drafted, and this is not about me, it's about you. But the only kind of form of training I could do leading into getting drafted was swimming. And I thought swimming, 400 or 500 meters with a cast on and so forth was going to hold me in pretty good stead. And then I remember one of the first pre-season sessions, I jumped in the water pretty confident that I'd put the work in and the warm up was 500 meters. And I was like, oh my God. And then I cramped. I was trying to keep up with everyone. So I think that just shows the quality of swimmer I am. I'm more like a rock. So I just thought I'd disclose that, given
it's hard.
It is very hard.
It is hard.
And my shoulder range isn't great either.
Yeah. When you're land-based, like you are, that transition into the water where you've got no control, it's actually quite humbling. And so it's the same for me in reverse.
Yeah. So you spoke of just missing out 92. Then 96 comes along, Atlanta. How confident? I mean, the thing that blows my mind is that I know that there's World Championships and there's trials and there's nationals in between each Olympics. But for the average Joe, I suppose the time that it's put up in lights is the Olympic Games. What's the process for 4 years leading into your first opportunity to do exactly what you'd been striving to do for a number of years?
So as I sit here today, when you say 4 years, I'm like, oh, that's so long. But when you've got that goal, it's really easy. So that goal setting process, putting that into practice, daily, weekly, monthly, and then annually, it's really easy. So every time a major event comes around, you're you're raring to go, but everything leads to that one particular moment, which for us was April 1996, which is when the trials. I never wanted to look beyond the trials just because of the depth of the events that I swam in this country. When you've got, Kieran, who was a defending Olympic champion, world record holder, Glenn Houseman, who was the silver medalist from the previous Olympics. You just didn't want to put the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
So that period between 92 and 96 went really quickly because there was always these goals that I was striving to achieve and ticking them off. But yeah, come 1996, it was April, and then deal with everything else after that. And hopefully it was a good outcome.
When you speak about the goal setting, because I'm really interested, and I know that even kids today, I think it's spoken about, but sometimes not really executed on. I even think about my own journey in footy. There'd be a big portion that actually just kind of day to day just try and tick off the session and don't really have anything to work towards. Is there any kind of framework that you used that really helped, when you're planning 4 years in advance? Was there a framework that you used then? And is there an element of that you use in your day-to-day life now?
I probably use it more now because the reality is it's never going to get as exciting in life as being at the Olympic Games and standing behind the blocks and representing your country.
Yeah.
So I do use it so it's every day is not just a box tick exercise.
Yeah.
But at that point in time, what I realized pretty early on was that as you would know, as you evolve and develop physically and mentally, you're always making gains and you're always making best times and, continuing to raise the bar. But they got to a point where it just sort of stagnates, and that can be like depressing when you're an elite athlete and you don't see any progress. So for me, it was a way of ensuring that every session that I got something out of it. And so the goal setting was, okay, well, clearly I'm not feeling it today. So how can I make this a positive session? So whether it was something technically, as opposed to just always looking at the clock to see what time it was. And then as I evolved to the end of my career, I mean, I was never going to beat Ian Thorpe. He was too good. Grant Hackett was an absolute machine. Kieran is Kieran. So for me, I knew I wasn't going to win. So it wasn't, my goal setting had to be more about the result, but about the outcome and the process to the outcome. And so that's why the goal setting part was always really important, because the mind was one thing, but physically I couldn't do it.
So the growth and progress for you was almost competing against yourself. And then is that a fair way of putting it?
Yeah.
Like when you have got freaks as well, that in your head you're going, well, the reality is it's going to be a fair challenge to beat them.
It's really interesting to talk about it a long time removed, because it's probably, if you wanted to do a study on how not to do things mentally, I would be a really good case study, because I was awful. I was absolutely awful, to the point where it was a detriment, I think, to my career. I don't think it would have changed the outcome because of the freaks that you talked about, and I say that with all due respect. But yeah, myself was the biggest.
When you say detrimental, is it the pressure you put on yourself, the negative self-talk, the fact that, I mean, a simple statement like telling yourself that you're enough without having to win gold, I'm assuming that isn't something that existed in your world.
Yeah. Yeah, the negative self-talk. And, I always put it back to my results would dictate how people viewed me and whether they liked me or not.
Yeah.
And
that's a heavy burden to carry.
It is. And I think it's probably more common than I realized. But yeah, I wish I had have known that my family and friends would love me regardless if I came first or last.
Yeah. That's a pretty important message for anyone, whether you're 60 or 70 years old or whether you're just starting out in life. Like, to know that love from the people that really do care about you is unconditional.
Absolutely.
How much of your life did you live, do you think, thinking the opposite?
24 years.
It's a long time.
It is. And I like I said, I regret it. And if I could have my time again, I would do things.
But you don't know what you don't know, right?
Hindsight is a
and we're all guilty
thing.
of it. Well, let's talk about that, because I know the 1996 final, Perkins wins from lane 8, which is heroic effort.
Amazing.
How does that then implicate or change the narrative you're telling yourself in your head?
The interesting thing was the first day of those Olympics, I swam 200 freestyle. Literally was a fun event. I think I went ranked in number 10 in the world, made the final, which to me was like winning a gold medal.
Yeah.
And then end up coming away with a bronze medal. It was the best experience I ever felt in my whole career, like a bronze, right? And then you fast forward 5 days later, I win another bronze in the 400 freestyle. And then the 1500 comes around, and I knew the moment after the heats had finished and Kieran was in lane 8, I was not going to win.
Really?
Yeah. I wasn't.
For people that aren't into swimming, winning from lane 8 is
It's
very, very hard, right?
It's very rare. It is very rare.
Water's not as smooth.
Can't see.
Because you can't see across the pool.
Yeah.
And I assume in a 1500, that's a long time not to be able to see, right?
Yeah.
But in saying that, sorry, we'll come back to the way that you feel post the heat and that feeling. But you're the first person in 92 years to win a medal in the 200, 400 and 1500. That must be something that's pretty incredible you said you set goals, and it was a lot of the time it was competing against yourself. You must walk away, part of you going, wow, that's an amazing feat.
It took me a while.
Yeah.
It took me a long time. I worked with someone you may know, Simon Lloyd, was my sport psychologist.
Yeah.
And working with him, trying to see what I had achieved was something to be proud of, took a lot of work. So today, extremely proud. Don't look at the medals. I couldn't tell you where they were. But I am proud of what I achieved, but probably more proud of other things in my life. That's just one thing that I'm proud of. But yeah, it took a while to get there.
So post the disappointment of not winning gold, I assume, even though you kind of knew it in a roundabout way, you've spoken openly about suffering from bulimia, depression, and I can only imagine, because I know the times that I have been injured and swimming in a pool, golly, you can get deep in your thoughts. So how much was the journey you're on from a personal point of view and the challenges you're facing, and then doing the thing that you love, but maybe it got to a point where you started to think, maybe I don't love it, or maybe it's not healthy for me, but that is the thing that's fueling so many of the thoughts?
Yeah, it's that's a really good question. Despite what I was going through mentally, I did still love the sport. It was also my safety net.
Yeah.
It was a security blanket for things that at the time I didn't realize I was going through. So regardless of how much I was, mentally struggling and everything that I was putting myself through, there was always the safety of going back to the pool, regardless if I was injured and what was going on between my ears. So for me, the sport, as much as it hurt me, it also saved me.
And when you say saved me, I know that you've said that there's been times in your life where you've thought about taking your life. Mm-hmm. Has that been, a particular phase of your life, or was it over a longer period of time?
Yeah, it was post 96.
Yeah.
You come back and in my mind, I failed. And linking, that my results is how people viewed me, was the big driver in that. And then there's, dealing with who I was as a person, which I'd, subconsciously tried to just avoid. So that period, between 96 and 99, before I started working, with psych, was the darkest points. I was in a really bad situation. We're in the training environment. It just wasn't healthy for me being where I was in Canberra, because I was able to isolate myself and and not deal with what I needed to deal, despite having everything available to me.
Yeah.
I chose not to take advantage of that and try to help myself.
And when you speak about dealing with what you personally, you were the third Australian athlete to come out as gay.
Right.
Is that right?
Maybe. Well, I didn't have the. Well, I didn't
male,
understand, or I didn't have the courage to come out.
Yeah.
While I was competing, not that I kind of knew, because this is always kind of weird to articulate, but you know, that journey of trying to figure out who I was didn't happen until post retirement. There's that word.
Which was 2002.
Yeah. And so that journey was.
How old were you then? 27?
Yeah. So that journey in itself was an interesting one.
Yeah.
But then on reflection, I feel like after I did come out, it sort of released this, I know, this subconscious where you're like, oh yeah, that all makes sense. This makes sense. And it all sort of, to me, it underpinned a lot of what I went through, but not really wanting to accept what I was going through.
I assume now, obviously, being able to share your story and some of the struggles that you had with it. I have a gay brother-in-law, so I kind of, his story is different to yours and the way that you'd manage and deal with it. But it is a big moment when you tell family and friends, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Because it's just you. What was that like from a lifting a weight and feeling like you could finally be Dan Kowalski?
Two different scenarios. One, I told my family and close friends, and that was it. That's all I planned on ever doing. I didn't feel it was anyone else's business. And also I was scared. I was absolutely petrified, you know, because I didn't really know of any gay athletes, male athletes in particular. So I didn't necessarily have any role models or people I felt like I could talk to. So I was like, okay, I've told the people that I need to tell, and I'll just live my life, hopefully without judgment. And it wasn't till nearly 5 years later that I was kind of forced to come out publicly, which I didn't want to do.
You were threatened by a journalist that they were going to kind of lay it out there. They'd heard.
The trashy tabloid magazines were.
Is there a pain attached with that because you didn't get to choose when you shared it with the world? You were kind of forced to do it. And is there a part of you that goes, that's actually really unfair because it's my story to tell, not someone else's?
Spot on. Absolutely. Like, exactly. That's it. I wanted to be able to control the narrative of my own journey and my experience. So to be threatened with the fact that someone was going to take that away from me was the only reason why I chose to come out publicly. And yeah, I'm glad I did because it was important for a number of reasons, but more so for me than anything.
Does it surprise you, given AFL background, that there hasn't been a male, or does it not surprise you?
This is a really difficult one. Yes, it does surprise me, but I totally get it. Yeah. Like, I don't think there's any group of athletes or sport in this country under the microscope more than you guys. And considering how, despite how more accepting we are of people from different walks of life and backgrounds, there's more of a platform for people to be like horrible and mean and nasty keyboard warriors. So I'm not surprised that someone hasn't.
Through what could have been your most happy times, but also there was some challenges within it. And I suppose, like, your greatest growth, one of my favourite sayings is often comes from your darkest times. And maybe that's part of just releasing the baggage you've been carrying. And when I say baggage, it's kind of the stuff that's been holding you back, not because it's baggage. The strategies and support that you had to put in place and the key people that really did help you through both the professional journey, but then also the personal one. Is there anyone you'd love to mention? I know you mentioned Simon Lloyd, but is there anyone else that was there in your corner that if if they weren't there or in your life, maybe things would be really different?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it was something that I, in my mind and the thought process was I had to do this on my own. I was doing a lot with Wayne Schwass at the time and the work that he was doing around mental health.
He's got Pucker Up, is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Is that the charity?
It's been a while. And he was bizarrely one of the first people that I told. I don't know why,
Okay.
because I didn't really know him that well. But I think the nature of the conversations that we were having with regards to mental health, and I think it was also one thing that really helped me to be able to be comfortable to talk about it. And I've never really shared that before, but he probably wouldn't even realize that the positive impact and the strength and confidence that he gave me to be able to be accepting of who I was. Otherwise, it was stupidly just, again, trying to navigate it on my own. But, between Simon and the foundations that he sort of helped lay for me, just in all aspects of my life, was really, really important.
So then retire 2002, you go through this journey of effectively allowing yourself to be yourself, which I assume is eye-opening, energizing, but also obviously there's some things you need to navigate. And from a work point of view, the transition from being a full-time swimmer, were you studying during your swimming days or working a part-time role anywhere, or did you have other interests that you wanted to pursue post your swimming days?
Yeah, I was one of those typical start uni, 10 years later finish.
At least you finished.
Yeah, my parents were they let me obviously take my own journey. They gave up a lot. We moved from Adelaide to the Gold Coast for my career, and so they gave up a lot. And they didn't necessarily like, you have to finish university, but they were like, we would really love if you ensured that you had a backup. So started at Bond Uni on the Gold Coast, and then I moved to Melbourne for my swimming, enrolled at Deakin, and went on the first day. And this commute from where I was living in Aspendale, going into the city where there used to be a pool on Batman Avenue, and then going out to Deakin. After the first day, I was like, I absolutely cannot do this from a recovery point of view. And David Parkin was heading up the course that I was doing, and I went in and I said, I can't do this. And he said, this will be one of the biggest regrets of your life. And I remember I went back to him when I was retired, and I was like, you're absolutely right. You're at spot on. It was one of the biggest regrets, because I'm 26, 27. I still have 20 subjects to go, and I've got no work experience. So finishing uni was one of the things. I ended up going back to Bond and getting my degree there, and is one of the probably things I'm most proud of, because it would have been easy for me just to take a totally different, trajectory. I was working part-time at the Brisbane Lions, actually, because I needed some work experience, something to put on my resume, and they offered me a full-time job, and I was like, oh, yeah, I could just do this and be comfortable, but I knew I needed to.
What was the full-time job role?
It was a sponsorship coordinator at the Brisbane Lions.
Yeah.
It was first job that I'd ever had. First day there, I broke the printer. I thought I'd broken the whole organisation, but it was. I knew then that, listen, you need to finish this degree thing, and you need to probably think more than just being the sponsorship coordinator at the Brisbane Lions.
So fast forward a few years, you finish your degree, you get some work experience at a different. What do you find yourself doing?
I worked for an organiser committee in 2007. Melbourne hosted the World Aquatics Championships, so I stayed pretty close to home in a sense of what I knew. And
makes sense.
Yeah, and so that enabled me to understand ways of working, and kept me involved in sport. And then I felt safe because I knew what I was doing. I tried coaching. I moved to the US for a couple of years and worked in the collegiate system. I figured out pretty damn quick that I hated coaching.
What parts of the coaching did you not like?
So
I mean, assuming if you go into coaching, you are happy to work with people and get the best out of them.
love that part. So you're there, you're with young people who love swimming, but education's important to them. So I love that component, the well-being stuff. Absolutely loved it. Technically, it's one thing to be able to swim, it's another thing to be able to coach and articulate what you see and all the rest. So I had no idea. It was crazy. I couldn't do it at all. And I've discovered very, very early on in my head, I'm like, I sold everything. I moved over here to this place, which is minus 40 in the middle of winter. And I'm like, what? And nah, this is not for me.
Yeah, but to have the courage to do it.
Also ran away though.
Okay.
I hadn't come out publicly then.
Right.
And this was
That
also,
was part of it.
yeah, I go.
Did you know that at the time?
Yeah. But I wasn't ready to deal with all that. I should have done my research and realized where I was going. I was going to the middle of
freezing cold.
Yeah, Madison, Wisconsin, and it was just awful. No disrespect.
Okay, so you won't be going back there to live anytime soon?
Absolutely not.
And now reside in Sydney, happy.
Yeah, I came back here. Married, yeah. Came back here and started working at the Victorian Institute of Sport in the wellbeing space. Absolutely loved it. And that was a really interesting time because that's when I chose to come out publicly, and I was super nervous because I was working with athletes and I didn't want to be ostracized, and in my head, I was going to lose respect and so forth, but they couldn't have been any more supportive. And that internally gave me a lot of confidence. Hey, listen, it's all in your head. So, snap out of it. And I've been able to sort of progress from there, always in sport. I've been really lucky in that regard. And yeah, in Sydney for 14 years and married and no pets, no kids, no responsibility.
Intentions to have either of those?
Absolutely not.
No.
Yeah.
Just happy how it is now.
I barely look after myself.
Well, that's fair enough. I'm really intrigued as to trying to get inside your head during those times. So the VIS, the stories you're telling yourself about what people might think, what's the process of unpacking those thoughts and how long does it take? Or do you still have moments now where it's does someone think something of me because of who I am? Or do you just not care anymore?
No, I absolutely do care. I really wish that I could sort of, park that part of my brain and just sort of leave it on the bedside table every morning when I leave the house and not care so much about what people think. But I've always been that way. I've never felt from a sporting point of view, I've never felt like I belonged where I got to, if that kind of makes sense. And so there's always this in a monologue, but it's I want people to, care and like me, and I care what they think about me.
So there's still a part of you that has to protect you.
I feel, yeah, definitely, which is ridiculous. I'm 50 nearly.
Yeah.
And I've got to, but I recognize it.
Yeah.
I absolutely recognize it.
I just think it's important from other people that haven't had the same experiences to understand that, we are all on a different journey and we're dealing with our own things along the way. But I know I've had times in my life where you're like, oh geez, I hope someone doesn't think that of me because of that or whatever it is. So it is interesting from my point of view.
Yeah.
That, as you said, at near 50, to still be carrying some of those things. And I know that I'm sure it's a daily work in progress for you because, as you said, you wish you could leave it at the bedside table and not have to worry about it, but it is just part of your life. Is that the power of acceptance that allows you to kind of continue to progress and move forward?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And it shouldn't be that hard.
Yeah.
I just, for some reason, make it a little bit more complicated and harder than it should be. And it is a daily struggle.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous.
How much do you rely on your partner in talking about those kind of things, or if you are having a bad day?
I, the last nearly 5 years that we've been together have been the best 5 years of my life, because he's enabled me to just live and be happy.
Yeah.
And so I do, quite often he'll be like, snap out of it. So I really appreciate that. I have amazing work colleagues who get it too. So I feel very safe,
Yeah.
I guess you could say. And that enables me to be able to do what I love.
Is there any, like for me personally, I love to journal because it helps me get my thoughts out of my head onto a piece of paper, and it feels like when I do that, they don't control me as much. I have a couple of activities that I love to do every morning that helps me kind of just feel like I'm at least giving my chance to be at my best. Is there any methods or techniques that you've implemented in your life that you have carried through from a mental health journey or well-being journey? Some of the things that you're providing advice to colleagues and so forth?
Exercise. It's not, I listen to, you and I'm like, and I was aware that you're journaling and those sort of mindfulness stuff. I don't do any of that. My equivalent, I guess, is exercise.
Yeah. It is a form of meditation.
Yeah.
And
routine. So for me, it's, I swim with the squad 3 days a week, and then I'll go to the gym, headphones are in, and that's my time. And I absolutely love that time. And if I don't do it, if there's for a reason, but I don't do it for a number of days, then I can tell.
Yeah.
I can absolutely tell. But I probably need to be better at that, because I'm aware that I do have a tendency to maybe withdraw and not be my best self if I don't do the little things like that. So it's something that I need to...
I mean, the great part is that you're aware of it.
Yeah.
And that's part of the journey, right? Once you acknowledge it, then you can go, oh, shit, now I need to do something about it. So I commend you for acknowledging it. I think we've kind of touched on the moments that maybe you could go back or would change to help you on your own journey to get to where you are now. But one thing we do love to ask on Shaped is, if you could go back to your younger self, call it 15, 16-year-old self, what's one piece of advice that you would give yourself then that you think would significantly help your journey up until now?
Yeah, it's definitely that, regardless of the outcome, that people, my friends, my family are going to love me regardless.
Yeah.
And it sounds a little bit corny, but
I don't think it sounds corny at all.
It was such a big driver, like in wanting to be accepted and placing, a gold medal around that was just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. Do you think you attached your self-worth to performance?
100%. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Would you say now that you love yourself?
I do love myself. I
mean, for some people, that's really hard to even say.
I love myself. I'm proud of the man that I am. And that's a big driver of why I do what I do. I had the opportunity to, be in Paris with the Olympic team, and you see everything in that environment. And I see some of myself in some of the athletes that are in the village. And then I aspire to be like some of those for the way in which they carried themselves, conducted themselves. And so I feel very lucky to be in the position that I am, and what I do has enabled me to, be proud of who I am.
Well, as you should be.
Thank you.
One thing I did skip over was the 2000 Sydney Olympics. Qualify in the 200 4x200 relay. Star-studded lineup. Then Thorpe comes in to replace your spot in the final. Did that hurt at the time? Was it expected? Did you know that it was potentially going to happen? Yeah, answer that first.
Yeah, I definitely knew it was going to happen. I don't know if you ever had games or periods of games where you just knew you went on, right? And you knew that maybe your role was detrimental to the overall outcome. that's where I was at. Like physically, I was horrible, but it was probably the strongest mentally that I'd ever been in my whole career.
Yeah, right.
Because I'd learned to value process over outcome, and the goal setting had switched to being able to have wins for myself. So in the training camp before, it was actually in Melbourne, and I was awful. And so the morning of that heat, I walked out onto the pool deck and with my 3 teammates, I saw my family. My family didn't go to the 96 Olympics.
Yep.
So I saw them, and that was like, for me, that was like a victory in itself. I was the last leg in the heat.
Yeah.
And so we were so far, without sounding arrogant, we were so far in front. It was going to be a mental game for me to be able to push the time that I needed to do to make it. And as soon as I touched the wall, I knew that I'm done. This is my Olympics are over. I'll be cheering tonight. And that was hard.
Okay.
Because I wanted to stand on the podium with the other 3 guys and hear the national anthem in front of that crowd. One of the things that I get really emotional about is, when you're at the grand final at the MCG and you hit 110,000 people and the noise that creates, and then the anthem plays, and that was our equivalent.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that opportunity, and that was really hard. But I didn't deserve that opportunity either. I just simply wasn't good enough.
I can completely understand where you're coming from, because there has been many matches where I haven't contributed to the level that you would hope or wanted to. And I assume when you're saying what you're saying, for me, it'd be like being tagged, not impacting the game like you'd want to, but then going and playing on one of their better players and nullifying their impact.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of the vibe that you're going with when you're not at your best, but you still can contribute in a different way.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So one of the things, like I got a gold medal for being the heat swimmer, and I feel kind of like a fraud with regards to that because I didn't swim in the final. And I recognize I played a part in that team getting to the final and then winning a gold medal. But when I'm asked about that, I say, I feel like if I'm playing footy, I was in the preliminary final and then I was on the bench but never actually crossed the line and played in the grand final. How would you feel if that was you?
It's a great question, and I've been asked many times with regards to, do I think that every player that has played during the season should be awarded a grand finalist medal, a premiership medallion? And I think they should. And the journey we wanted as a footy club was that everyone who has contributed to getting there, because at the end of the day, whether it's a 4x200 relay or a bigger team sport, you've contributed in having that success or making that success happen. So I understand the feeling, because on the flip side, it's like the conversation I had with Job about a Brownlow medal that in my head, well, I came second, I didn't come first. So I completely understand the feeling you have with it, but I also think that without your contribution, the team may not have been there.
Yeah. I've always wanted to ask that question as someone who, of the example that I use, because that actually makes me feel.
Yeah. And another example is 2019, Alex Rance did his knee, didn't play, but had such an impact from a coaching and learning point of view. Jack Graham dislocates his shoulder in the preliminary final, doesn't play. There was 2 or 3 guys, I think in 2017. No, it was 2019 as well, that our VFL team played in a grand final the weekend before. So they didn't play in the prelim. They didn't play in the grand final because they were carryover emergencies to make sure that we had fit players for the grand final, and then don't get picked to play in the grand final as well. But they were as important as anyone else on that field on that day. So I think you thoroughly deserve it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, because it does sit. I'm not sure how others feel in that situation, but for me, that was definitely something that I still carry.
Well, maybe you can let it go.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, I appreciate your openness, your honesty, you making the time for us, and sharing your story with other people that are on a journey themselves. I mean, some of the key things that I took out of our conversation was just how important goal setting is, particularly when there's such a long lead time to performance, but also the way that it now impacts your life. And part of that was that you started to become obsessed with the process, less about the results, and that kind of helped release this expectation and pressure that you continue to put on yourself. The unconditional love, like speaking to the fact that the results don't determine what the people that are most important to you do or don't love you. They'll always love you no matter what, right? And for being you. And then the loving yourself. What I heard so much in what you get joy out of now is the fact that you now are a very proud man and who you are, but also the way that you've lost yourself in the service to others in the roles that you've had since being a professional athlete. So thank you for your insights. I appreciate it. And I'm sure that our community will as well. So I wish you all the best. I look forward to catching up again soon. But
Thank you, mate.
Thanks for coming on Shaped.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.